Hello and welcome to Link Ahead, the City of Dublin podcast. I'm Lindsay Weisenauer, the Director of Communications and Public Information.
And I'm Bruce Edwards, Digital and Brand Manager. We're so happy to welcome the Director of Outreach and Engagement, Christine Nardecchia, to Link Ahead. Welcome, Christine.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Just so our listeners know, Christine is a rock star. We don't use that word a lot in this world. You travel all over the country and talk about service and volunteerism as a core strategy for outreach. Where was this sparked in you?
The innovative spirit of Dublin. By developing this position, I think we just did our thing and cities around the world noticed, and we began to tell our story, and it just snowballed from there. And we're always happy to share it. It's so much easier nowadays that we can do it online and via Zoom, but it was sparked in me having started my career in the not-for-profit sector. And I wasn't convinced that Dublin needed my position until I came here to meet everybody and realized, wow, this is really about civic engagement. It's about democracy. I'm going to give it a try. And 24 years later, I'm still giving it a try.
I was going to say, I'm going to go off script. So you've been here 24 years. That's 2 more years than you, Bruce?
Absolutely. Yes,
Wow.
we go way,
We grew
way
up
back.
here together.
Yes.
We've got some
We were
veterans
11.
here
I never tell
today.
anyone how old I am. I say I was 11 when I started.
So were you civic and community minded in high school or college? When
I
earlier?
was. Our whole family really was. We outreach was just sort of a daily thing, whether it was faith-based or cause-based.
Christine, as Director of Outreach and Engagement, in a nutshell, tell us what you do.
Well, I get to work with a dynamic team, and we oversee 4 buckets of work. And the most obvious and the one you see daily, every day of the year, is volunteerism. The second is aging in place, which is known as Forever Dublin, which we can talk about in a bit. The third is another rock star on our team named Barbara Ray, who oversees nature education. And then we also do a lot of other education efforts on local government, our form of government, through Citizen University, Citizen U, Jumpstart, those sorts of things. And then finally, a really important bucket is working side by side with our faith community and our nonprofit community. We cross-refer so often and work together a lot. So it's a lot, and it is a pleasure.
So Christine, you talked about the nature education and Citizen U. How did those programs start and how have they grown?
Nature education, Barbara is our second nature education coordinator, began because of the need of the amount of resident questions we were getting about living peaceably with wildlife.
Mm-hmm.
So the nature education coordinator really has a formula of doing a lot of education sessions and sort of getting out there so that our residents know we have a face, a person, and somebody who is really dedicated to take care of those things. And it has grown quite a bit. She has a great volunteer team around her who helps her to produce all of these classes. Citizen U, I think we're on our 6th or 7th class, was just something I always wanted to do and felt we needed to do, was to teach people about local government and our form of government, knowing that the more people learned, the more they would serve and the better residents they would be. And we've proven just that. The alumni we have in this program have grown to over 100. And we also have a citizen program in the Dublin Police Department and also Washington Township. So we're really a city of learning.
And you have a lot of people that show up for that. I mean, how many, on average, people do you have in one of those classes, in the Citizen U class?
I prefer that it stay at around 24.
Okay.
It's just, if it gets too large, then it really affects the relationships they build with one another and with our staff.
Sure.
Particularly our staff. Citizen U is one of the few times some staff members get to interact with citizens in such a good and positive way. And it's an opportunity for somebody on the front line to really show what they're doing on a daily basis to keep things safe and rolling here.
Forever Dublin is like this big term, and it's kind of leads you to say, well, what is Forever Dublin? So can you kind of go into detail and talk about our partnership with Centero?
I sure can. One of the advantages we have in this city is a council who sets goals on a regular basis. And several years ago, council set the goal for us to be much more mindful of what it was like to grow older, so that this community was a lifelong community for everybody. It wasn't just a place where you come to raise your kids. So we embarked on a long-term study and community conversations with experts from around the states, as well as hundreds of older adults and caregivers, to define that city on a hill in which to age in place. And what was born out of that was Forever Dublin, which, by the way, was named by our citizens. And it contains several different areas. One is, of course, transportation. And thanks to rock star J.M. Rayburn and our transportation mobility, we have the Dublin Connector. We are really looking deep into our housing stock here. But the one thing we were able to focus on immediately was health, wellness, and social service referral. And we contract with Centero to oversee that. There is a navigator there who acts very much like a concierge. At a concierge at a hotel, how do I get directions to this place or tickets to this place? Our navigator with Forever Dublin is able to help folks with aging in place questions and caregiver issues.
As a shameless plug, if you'd like to learn more about J.M. Rayburn, please listen to an earlier podcast that we did with him.
I was going to say, we have a lot of rock stars in this city.
We do.
We do, and that's what makes it a pleasure to work here day by day.
Yep.
Christine, Dublin was proud to be an original member of the Cities of Service Coalition, so we've really walked the walk here and elsewhere to encourage other cities to really leverage volunteer service efforts. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, we really were proud to be with then Mayor Bloomberg and leaders from key cities around the country to say we are going to just stake our claim in saying that volunteer engagement is really crucial in local government. And we became an example, and I was able to present and do a little teaching to some of these cities on how to engage volunteerism in local government. I have lost count of how many cities now around the country who have developed what they are called, their title is Chief Service Officer in cities around the country. And so it has become much more of a norm around the country because of the Cities of Service, and we're really proud to have been an original member of that coalition.
Now, there's both a spirit to volunteerism and a real need for volunteerism. If it weren't for volunteers, what wouldn't happen in Dublin?
Well, I think the most obvious answer to that is our special events would never happen were it not for the hundreds of volunteers who help. We just last week had Spooktacular and had maybe 150 volunteers who helped to make that happen. But there are some other programmatic things that would never happen. So, for example, Ferris Wright has a group of heritage interpreters who teach about and demonstrate and tour the community through that remarkably historic area. There are things that wouldn't get planted in the ground. If neighborhoods want to do projects, we're able to help to facilitate that. Volunteers have worked diligently this year to help with our historic cemetery known as the Dublin Cemetery along Bridge Street. So many things that happen day to day wouldn't happen without volunteers. Even an usher, when you go see theater production, are there. And when I think about what our staff members don't have to do alone, like a Barbara Ray teaching a nature ed class, she needs 6 people around her to help teach these classes. And so day to day, they're doing some really brilliant things.
You mentioned day to day, and we really need volunteers 12 months out of the year, not just around the holiday seasons and when people are really thinking about it. Talk about the need for it 365.
It is. One of the things, especially our nonprofit community experiences this time of year is, I would like to volunteer for the holidays. And nonprofits tend to be overrun with that question. They're happy to get the help offer. And so we've become really good at taking that information in. But so please continue to reach out. Every single day of the year, in the middle of the winter, one of the things we need the most is folks to help our older adults who are isolated and can't dig themselves out in a snow event. We're really fortunate that we can look internally at our database and say, you've got a neighbor who can't dig out from this ice storm. Can you go and do it? So year round, even if it's in the heat of summer, where we need to open cooling stations and need volunteers to staff those things, we're really proud to be one of those phone calls to say, what can you do to help this effort? And chances are we can find the right sort of people to ask.
So here's a real simple question. How many volunteers do we need?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will tell you that we utilize almost 3,000 volunteers in a year's time. That number is starting to decrease for a really, really good reason. Because we want to use fewer volunteers for longer periods of time who are putting in more hours. So Ferris Wright and our heritage interpreters, that's a really good answer or a good example of using fewer volunteers who are giving longer hours. I don't know. How many do we need? Is the number infinite?
Well, I'm sure you get a call. We're starting a new program. We want to get something. We want to get boots on the ground. You get that call, right?
I do get that call. And then you do something like a job task analysis and say, okay, what is it that needs to get done? What's the dragon that needs to be slayed? Where's the field we need to be plowed and overturned? And we're able to sit down and assess the number of people, the age limit, the age minimum, the abilities needed, sometimes language is needed. So we're able to assess that long before we ask for volunteers to do it. And we actually write a description of it so that we have a real understood role of what that volunteer is serving.
You know, that database that you mentioned is just so interesting because I think a lot of people would want to sign up and help people in their own community. So if someone is listening right now and wants to volunteer but doesn't know where to start, what do you suggest?
They can send an email to the easiest email in the world, and it's volunteer@dublin.oh.us. Tell us what you're looking for. And really, I think often our department needs to be the Department of Dot Connecting, and that my position should be Chief Dot Connector. Because if we aren't the right fit, we're going to refer you to where you may be a really good fit. So we take that in, and we even call upon you in the future. It could be months, it could be next week, but we do have a really robust database that we use on a daily basis.
Christine, you and I have worked together for a long time, and I still remember the very first Irish festival that I ever worked. And I was like, how are we going to manage all these people? And I was told, well, we have volunteers that staff, I was in the Wee Folk area, and I was told you'd have a crew of people that would help. And what I didn't realize then was the spirit of volunteerism, that people love this community. And if you're not a part of it, you should be a part of it. But one thing I noticed was just that how all these people come together for this common good, and everyone was happy. I mean, how do you do it? What is that spirit like in Dublin, Ohio?
That spirit is in abundance. And I will tell you, it never, ever ceases to amaze me. I don't take it for granted. I have a little tradition every Friday of every Irish festival. I stand up in the command post and I can see out a window, and I watch the first shift of volunteers happily walk into that event, and it never ceases to amaze me, and I get chills. There is a spirit of togetherness, a spirit of community. The motives are as varied as the volunteers themselves, but people are just happy to be a part of their own community. And we harness that into a learning experience that, hey, this is a local government. This makes an economic impact. This is how you can connect with one another. Here's how you can learn more. So what we do with that is really where even more magic happens.
And you mentioned this earlier too. You're never too young or too old to volunteer, right? So our youngest volunteer is
Kindergarten.
Nice. Great.
Right.
All the kindergartners, get out there and help out.
Well, we have a program called Kids in Dublin Service, and it's K through 5.
Oh, wonderful. And then how about on the other side of the spectrum, what is our oldest?
I think she's 86 or 87 right now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So not only do we have all ages, we have all abilities, we have all cultures, and typically if you take a slice of the demographics of a volunteer program, you're taking a slice of the demographics of the community you serve. So we really utilize it as a micro universe to the point where we maintain a language bank where we ever to need to call on somebody to assist with an emergency, or sometimes our nonprofit community reaches out to say, hey, do you have anyone who speaks Farsi? And we're able to go into that database, and it's extraordinary the amount of languages and people willing to step forward. So the diversity, it really just teaches us a lot, even within our own volunteer community.
I think I know the answer to this, but what is our biggest volunteer event?
Well, the one we produce is the Dublin Irish Festival. In Dublin, it's the Memorial Tournament produced by the PGA. But what we produce as a city, it definitely is the Dublin Irish Festival.
Christine, COVID affected everything on every level. So, can you kind of describe what it did to volunteerism?
I can. Scary time for everybody. But what we learned during COVID is that we were only as good as our relationships with people and agencies and our data. And so the nonprofit and faith community and my team met twice a week during COVID to keep our thumb on the pulse of needs, of any emergencies that were happening. And then what happened was an amazing connection among and between the faith community and our nonprofits and our volunteers. And we were able to keep our thumb on some pain points that really needed assistance. We reached out to hundreds of older, isolated adults per week. We learned that while you and I might say, order your groceries online, there were people who did not know how to do that. So we were able to develop how-to toolboxes for folks who didn't know how to do that and get it into their hands, how to get pharmaceuticals delivered, how to get food delivered. And then we also were able to pair people with folks who were isolated. And that really was our number one concern. It's one of the number one issues of government is to respond to disasters and safety. And I'm really proud that we are always at the ready and that we have a community who will step forward and say, what can I do? And they will listen to help us organize that.
When Robert Rance was here, he said his favorite initiative in the city is the Teen Buddy Initiative. Are we still doing that?
We're still doing that. In fact, they meet this evening where we pair teens with older adults. I don't know. I'm old enough to remember pen pals.
Yeah.
I don't know if they exist. But it's sort of like that. And it began during COVID where we asked teenagers to just reach out via phone to talk to older adults. And these amazing relationships flourished from those COVID chats. And we also have them assist with technology teaching. And yeah, it continues where we have, I think, more than 60 some people who are matched.
That is such a great program and so necessary. And I mean, no one should feel any shame in reaching out to the younger generation to learn how to do technology. Bruce and I are always asking our interns how to work things and what to do. So
Yes.
We're about to put volunteers in our senior lounge at the Dublin Community Rec Center.
Christine, we do our homework around here, especially when our guests are recognized for their outstanding accomplishments. You were named a Woman of the Week by Executive Elements last year, and they asked you some interesting questions that we would like to ask too.
You live in the flat Midwest, but you need your mountain fix. Your escape is the mountains of North Carolina. Tell us where and why.
I have been going to Asheville, North Carolina, for the past 20 some years. And I don't know, I just feel like I can breathe better in the mountains. A very best friend of mine introduced me to it. And we have a tradition of going once or twice a year just to be in those beautiful, beautiful mountains. I'm
I
definitely,
love Asheville.
I'm a mountain person at heart.
All right, so your roots are first-generation Italian-American, and you have a favorite movie also about an Italian-American family. What is it?
I do. It's Moonstruck because it's one of the few movies about Italian-Americans that it's not about some bad things that it's just a comedy and a pleasure to watch that.
Speaking of family, you said there's no doubt your heroes in life are your parents. Tell us about them and what they did to instill that value of service and volunteerism.
Well, I definitely hit the jackpot when it came to family and certainly to parents who came here with nothing and embraced everything great about America and our culture. And they did such a great job raising us to say, we're teaching you what we know. It's up to you to go on and make your best. But I think that foundation from which we came was just such a gift that I carry on my shoulder and in my heart daily.
Okay, well, these questions help tee up our closing segment, which has become a tradition here on Link Ahead. Some rapid fire questions. Are you ready, Christine?
I'm ready.
Okay, if you could take a trip anywhere in the world, where would it be?
I would go back to Iceland.
Really?
That was my favorite trip ever.
Okay.
Wow. You have guests in from out of town. What Dublin restaurant do you take them to?
Ooh, that's putting me on the spot.
It is. It
depends on the fare they like. I might take them to the North Market just so they can choose where to eat.
That's a good answer.
You also told Executive Elements that spas are your indulgence.
They are.
Name 3 people, famous or not famous, dead or alive, anyone that you would take on an ultimate spacation.
Wow. I think both of my grandmothers. Oh my gosh. I don't know. You stumped me on that one. I'll have to come back to that and think of someone else.
Okay.
Favorite volunteer event in Dublin?
It used to be the frog jump. I don't know if they're doing it. I like that wholesome Norman Rockwell kind of event, but I would definitely say the Halloween Spooktacular.
Everyone loves that one. Okay, an event outside of Ohio that you would like to volunteer for?
A Spoleto in Charleston, South Carolina.
What's the very next thing in your queued plan to read, watch, or listen to?
Aside from this podcast?
Aside from this podcast? Yes. I just downloaded a book that I am excited to read called Dinners with Ruth by Nina Totenberg. And it's about her relationship with Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Okay, Christine, thank you so much for being here. Continue to rally those great volunteers and continue to truly inspire us all.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, thank you for taking time to connect with your city. Tune in next time as we continue to explore the many personalities and experiences that make Dublin a thriving place to live, work, and grow.